Welcome to Global Truths. This is your host, Dr. Nasir Baig. As India moves forward on the global stage, marking nearly 8 decades of independence and boasting a massive economic expansion, a profound paradox is emerging. On paper, India is an unstoppable economic engine. Although eclipsed by allegations of manipulation by keeping an older reference year and extremely unequal distribution of wealth, still on paper, India's GDP has surged from a modest $1.2 trillion in 2008 to an impressive $4.2 trillion in 2025. Its diaspora leads some of the world's most critical technological institutions, and its diplomatic footprint spans every continent. Yet, beneath the glossy veneer of national success, a very different reality is taking shape in the minds of the global public. According to the latest comprehensive data from the Pew Research Center, international sentiment towards India is not celebrating its ascent. It is growing increasingly skeptical, polarized, and in key Western democracies, historically negative. Today, we're going to look deeply into the data, examine the stark global divides, and unpack the complex web of economic anxieties, corporate cultural frictions, and geopolitical realignments driving this historic shift, particularly in the United States, where public favorability has plummeted to its lowest point in nearly 2 decades. To grasp how the world views India today, we must look at the comprehensive multi-country survey conducted by the Pew Research Center. Surveying adults across 36 nations from February to May 2026. Pew painted a picture of an international community split almost directly down the middle. Across all 36 surveyed countries, a median of just 45% of respondents expressed a favorable view of India, while 41% held an unfavorable view. This means that in a majority of the countries surveyed, ranging from major Western democracies to developing economies, fewer than half of the population looks at India with approval. Nowhere are these stark divisions more pronounced than in India's immediate neighborhood. Though Pew limited its regional polling strictly to Sri Lanka, Bangladesh, and Pakistan, Sri Lanka registered the most positive outlook in the region, with staggering 79% of residents viewing India favorably, driven by deep economic interdependence and diplomatic relief efforts. Bangladesh presented a more cautious picture, with 51% holding an unfavorable view compared to 42% favorable, reflecting complex political transitions and shifting regional alliances. Pakistan, as expected due to decades of deep-seated geopolitical hostilities, recorded the most negative sentiment in the entire global study, with 91% expressing an unfavorable view and a minuscule 7% viewing India favorably. Outside of South Asia, India maintains pockets of robust support, such as in Kenya and the United Kingdom, where roughly 70% of adults view the country positively, alongside favorable majorities in Germany, Israel, Italy, Sweden, Japan, and Thailand. However, these bright spots are increasingly counterbalanced by significant drops in public approval across other pivotal nations. The most startling narrative to emerge from the 2026 data is located inside the United States. For years, the narrative surrounding US-India relations was one of an unshakable strategic partnership fueled by shared democratic values, economic cooperation, and a high-achieving Indian-American diaspora. The data tells a sobering story. In the last Pew survey, 50% of US residents expressed a negative view of India, while only 45% maintained a positive view. To understand the magnitude of this shift, we must look back to 2008 when Pew first began tracking these metrics. Back then, approximately 63% of the Americans held a favorable view of India. Over the last 18 years, that number has steadily eroded, finally crossing the tipping point where negative sentiments outweighs the positive. Compounding this drop in favorability is a striking disconnect regarding India's actual global footprint. While India's economic growth has been considered phenomenal, tripling its GDP over past 18 years, ordinary Americans are largely unconvinced of its global impact. Over half of the respondents, 54%, stated that India's global influence has stayed exactly the same, if not decreased. A notable 13% felt that India's influence had actually gotten weaker. Only 30% recognize that India's global influence has genuinely grown. Furthermore, domestic polarization within the US is clearly visible in the data. Democrats, 54% favorable, are significantly more inclined to view India positively than Republicans, only 40%. Additionally, older Americans, those aged 65 and older, view India far more favorably, 50%, than the younger demographic aged 18 to 29, only 42%, signaling a potential generational hardening of attitudes as younger citizens absorb new political and cultural narratives. A shift of this magnitude cannot be dismissed as a statistical anomaly. It is the cumulative result of deep-seated economic anxieties, corporate culture, cultural friction, and foreign policy divergences that have steadily poisoned the well of public opinion in the United States. Let us break down these reasons one by one. Number one, the H-1B visa system and economic anxiety. The first major friction point centers on the US immigration and visa infrastructure, specifically the H-1B visa program. With over 70% of all H-1B visa holders being of Indian descent, the visa program has become symbolically and structurally synonymous with Indian labor in the American consciousness. In recent years, high-profile investigations into immigration fraud, including coordinated schemes to cheat and manipulate the H-1B lottery system, have made front-page news. An average American worker facing housing crises, inflation, and a hyper-competitive white-collar job market, these stories feed into a toxic narrative. The perception has taken root that foreign workers, predominantly from India, are exploiting legal loopholes and displacing domestic American talent. The economic anxiety has directly fueled a broader, uglier wave of anti-immigrant sentiment and casual hostility towards Indians in corporate hubs and suburban neighborhoods alike. Second is corporate culture, insular networks, and workspace resentment. As Indian professionals have shattered glass ceilings to lead some of the most influential corporations in the world, including tech titans like Microsoft and Google, scrutiny over corporate culture has reached unprecedented levels. While the individual brilliance, resilience, and work ethic of Indian engineers and executives in Silicon Valley are appreciated by some, a persistent counter-narrative has grown within middle management and tech circles. There is a growing, often whispered perception that Indian managers engage in insular corporate networking, frequently referred to by critics as ethnic favorism. According to these criticisms, once Indian nationals ascend to leadership or hiring positions, they allegedly prioritize other Indian candidates for hiring and internal promotions, frequently bypassing equally or more qualified candidates of other nationalities. Whether entirely grounded in systemic reality or inflated by workspace gossip, the perception has generated quiet resentment, stoking accusations of workplace discrimination and alienating non-Indian colleagues who feel structurally sidelined. Third is geopolitical alignments and foreign policy friction. Beyond economics and corporate culture, India's evolving foreign policy has created sharp ideological friction with segments of the Western public. Number one, the Middle East and pro-Israel stance. India's deeply consolidated diplomatic, military, and technological alignment with Israel has drawn intense scrutiny. While viewed favorably by conservative defense circles, this partnership, coupled with the domestic political trajectory of the Indian government, has alienated progressive, liberal, and human rights focused groups in the West, who view these developments through a critical lens. Second is double standards on global conflicts and diplomacy. Furthermore, India's insistence on playing both sides in terms of trade and diplomacy, exemplified by its refusal to support West regarding trade, energy purchases, and diplomatic relations with Russia has alienated large portions of the American public. Mainstream Western voters, accustomed to viewing global geopolitics in black and white terms of alliance systems, often interpret India's actions as opportunistic or unaligned with democratic principles. Fourth is the weaponization of social media and domestic polarization. As political polarization intensifies across Western democracies, immigrant communities frequently find themselves caught in the ideological crossfire. Social media algorithms thrive on outrage and simplification. Complex geopolitical disputes, immigration debates, and cultural differences are routinely boiled down to viral anti-Indian rhetoric. Concerns regarding hygiene, cultural norms, and social behavior get hyped online, bleeding out of internet forums and into real-world interactions on college campuses, corporate offices, and local communities. What begins as a macro-level diplomatic disagreement rapidly transforms into micro-level social hostility. In the end, the latest findings from the Pew Research Center should serve as a stark wake-up call for policymakers, diplomats, and cultural leaders alike in India. India's rise in GDP, its technological dominance, and its regional footprint is failing to win the hearts and minds of the global public. In the United States, a toxic mix of immigration system, controversies, corporate cultural backlash, divergent foreign policy expectations, and online hostility has driven public favorability to historic lows. Numbers do not lie. And public perception, once fractured, is exceptionally difficult to repair. If India wishes to truly anchor its status as a respected global middle power, it must look beyond controversial economic metrics. It must confront these growing international anxieties head on, manage its global public relations with strategic maturity, and address the root causes before temporary diplomatic friction hardens into permanent cultural alienation. This is all what we have for you today. Hope to see you next time. Take good care of yourself.